This is probably the fastest and easiest layer cake quilt I have ever made. And I made this quilt maybe 5 years ago, at least 5 years ago. It is absolutely beautiful. The fabric is gorgeous. It's Bloomington by Layla Boutique. I love most of her fabric lines, and this quilt actually sat basted and ready to quilt for years. And I'm finally quilting it. I'm hand quilting it because I've always wanted to hand quilt a quilt completely. So I decided to do it with this one. Since the quilt was so fast to make or to piece, I decided this would be one that I'm going to spend a lot of time finishing with hand quilting and hand binding because it deserves it. It deserves that time since it was so quick to piece. A layer cake typically has 42 10-inch squares. For this pattern, you're going to want to pick out 38 of the 10-inch squares to use. Once you've chosen the 38 squares, pair all of those 38 squares together. So just pick two that you like the way they look together, pair them together, and do that with all of them. On the back of one of the squares in each pair, mark the half point on the square. So go 5 inches over and draw a line. Then put the pair right sides together, and you're going to sew a line of stitches along each side of that drawn line. All right, now that you have the 2 lines of stitches, cut right along that drawn line. All right, and so now you're going to have 2 squares that have 2 rectangles in them. You're going to sew all of your sets that same way. Mark the back of one of the sets at the halfway point, so 5 inches over. Pair them together and sew that 1/4 inch seam along each side of the drawn line. After you've sewn the stitches along each side of the drawn line, cut it in half. And then press your seams. Once you get all these blocks sewn, after you've paired up all those 38 10-inch squares, you'll want to pull out 25 of these. So set 25 of these blocks aside. And then from the remaining blocks, you're going to want to cut them in half. So just cut them along the 5-inch point on the block. And then you're going to have some blocks that look like this. You're going to want 25 of these after cutting those remaining blocks in half. And that's it. You're going to have 25 blocks that look like this and 25 blocks that look like this. And you're just going to assemble your quilt top. Instead of rows, we're going to assemble this quilt in columns. If you start your first column with the larger block, you're going to start your next column with the smaller block set. And you'll just alternate. You're going to have 5 of each type of block in each column. I'll put a diagram up on the screen so you can see how to assemble the quilt. It is just absolutely so easy. Once you get your columns figured out, you'll just start sewing together the columns. You'll place right sides together, sew a 1/4 inch seam, press your seams, and finish off the column and then sew them all together. Like I said, it is the easiest layer cake quilt you will ever make, but it is really fun to make. And it gives you that time that you may want to be able to spend a little more time quilting your quilt. I feel like when you have a layer cake and it has fabric in it that you really love, you really look for a pattern sometimes that will really highlight the fabric. And I think this one will do it because there's still nice big blocks, but it isn't like just sewing the 10-inch squares together, right? You get some nice dimension in the quilt still, and it's a lot of fun. It probably looks a little bit harder than it is to bring together. I feel like sometimes when you have some fabric, especially in a pre-cut like a layer cake, you really look for a way to really highlight that fabric. You don't want to cut it into really small squares, right? You want it to still have that beautiful design highlighted, and I think this pattern is the perfect way to do that. Let me know in the comments if you have a layer cake you've been waiting to cut into, and if you're going to finally cut into it with this pattern. After I finish up the hand quilting on this quilt, I will of course share some photos on my Facebook page and here in the community tab. I'm absolutely loving how the hand quilting is turning out. It really adds a lot of texture to this simple, easy quilt pattern, but I feel like it also doesn't detract from the beautiful prints in this fabric. But of course, you don't have to hand quilt your quilt if you decide to make this pattern. Finish it up however you would like with the quilting style that you like the most. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.